Victor Hale wasn't the kind of man anyone expected to see on the evening news, but behind the locked doors of his cluttered garage, he was quietly building weapons powerful enough to kill police officers, and he was only days away from using them. It began in a quiet suburban neighborhood that rarely made the news, the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and children played in the streets until dusk. The calm was broken in the middle of August when faint, muffled explosions began to echo through the night. At first, residents brushed them off as fireworks or construction work happening after hours. But when the blasts became more frequent and scorch marks started appearing on sidewalks and fences, curiosity turned into concern. Each morning, a new patch of burned grass or splintered wood would be discovered, and whispers began spreading about someone experimenting with dangerous materials. Police were called on several occasions, but with no witnesses and no clear evidence left behind, the case went nowhere. Unbeknownst to everyone, a man named Victor Hale had turned his cluttered garage into a secret workshop. His neighbors knew him as a solitary figure who rarely spoke and was often seen hauling boxes from his car under the cover of darkness. What they didn't know was that those boxes contained metal pipes, wires, timers, and chemicals, items he had been collecting from various hardware stores and online suppliers. He paid in cash whenever possible and used fake names for deliveries, always careful not to draw too much attention to himself. Victor had no background in engineering, but he had spent countless nights poring over online forums and manuals, studying every detail of bomb construction. His small garage smelled faintly of burning metal, a scent masked by the faint odor of gasoline and paint. On his workbench, every tool had a specific place, and his projects were laid out like pieces of a deadly puzzle. Each test explosion he carried out under the cloak of night gave him more confidence, and each successful detonation brought him closer to his ultimate goal. The quiet street had no idea that danger was brewing in its midst. Even when neighbors heard the metallic clinks and occasional loud thuds coming from Victor's garage, they dismissed it as home repairs. A few times, someone thought about calling the authorities, but Victor's reclusive nature kept him off most people's radar. He was invisible in plain sight, moving through the world without attracting suspicion. Every calculated step he took, every night he tested a new design, was part of a plan he had been nurturing for months. The explosions were just the beginning, a series of rehearsals for something far more destructive. And in Victor's mind, the real show was still to come. The first break in the strange case came on a foggy morning when a local dog walker ventured deeper into the wooded trails than usual. Her dog began barking furiously at a half-buried object near a fallen tree. Curious, she pulled it free, a black backpack, damp from the morning dew, its zipper partially open. Inside, wrapped in layers of plastic, were twisted bits of metal, wires, and fragments of scorched fabric. Alarmed, she quickly called the police. Within minutes, the area was swarming with officers and crime scene tape. The quiet forest suddenly transformed into an active investigation site. Forensic teams worked carefully, photographing every angle before removing the contents. The items were consistent with components from small explosive devices, matching the characteristics of the mysterious blasts reported in recent weeks. Investigators suspected the backpack had been dumped in a hurry, possibly after a failed test or to discard incriminating evidence. When the lab results came back, the wiring was found to have traces of a specific type of solder that was less common and sold by only a handful of local suppliers. Police began knocking on doors, asking residents if they had noticed anything unusual. Some recalled hearing loud pops or bangs at night. Others mentioned seeing an unfamiliar car parked at odd hours. Slowly, the search began to narrow toward one section of the neighborhood. Still, there was nothing concrete, no fingerprints, no direct witness placing a suspect at the scene of the explosions. What investigators couldn't see was that Victor Hale was watching the news coverage with a sense of calculated satisfaction. The discovery of the backpack hadn't rattled him. In fact, it confirmed his belief that law enforcement was still far behind him. He had already moved on to a new project in his garage, this time building something larger and more powerful. The scraps in the woods were nothing more than practice, a way to fine-tune his technique without risking exposure of his true design. In his mind, the final device wouldn't just make a loud bang. It would cause chaos and fear on a scale the small town had never seen. He began mapping out patrol car schedules, watching officers from a distance, learning when and where they would park. Every trip to the store was another opportunity to gather supplies under the guise of routine errands. The pieces of his plan were falling into place, and Victor was determined that the next time the police encountered one of his creations, it wouldn't be hidden in the woods. It would be waiting for them in plain sight. One evening, the investigation took a sharp turn when an anonymous tip came through the police hotline. The caller claimed that a man had been purchasing unusual amounts of chemicals and electronic components from multiple hardware and supply stores across the county. The details were precise dates, locations, even partial descriptions of the man's car. Detectives moved quickly, pulling surveillance footage from each store mentioned in the report. It didn't take long to spot him. Victor Hale, captured on camera at different locations, his face clear and unmistakable. Within hours, investigators secured a warrant to search his home, but before they could act, they needed to plan the operation carefully to avoid tipping him off. Unaware of the exact details, Victor began to sense that something was wrong. That afternoon, while sipping coffee on his porch, he noticed a dark sedan parked just down the street. It wasn't one of his neighbor's cars, and it had no visible markings. Later, another vehicle passed by slowly, its occupants glancing toward his property. Victor's paranoia sharpened into certainty he was being watched. That night, he stayed up in his garage, working feverishly to finish the largest device he had ever built. In his mind, time was running out, and his moment of impact had to come before the police made their move. By dawn, the device was ready. It was compact enough to transport easily, but powerful enough, in Victor's estimation, to obliterate a vehicle. He concealed it inside a battered trash bin, masking the scent of the chemicals with old food waste and scraps of cardboard. The bomb was wired to detonate when the bin's lid was lifted, a design Victor had tested successfully on smaller devices in the past. Before the streets grew busy, Victor loaded the bin into his truck and drove toward the police station's back entrance, where deliveries and trash collection usually occurred. He wheeled it into position, blending in with the line of other bins, and walked away as though nothing had happened. What he didn't anticipate was the keen eye of an officer doing an early morning security check. The bin seemed out of place, positioned closer to the building than usual. Rather than dismiss it, the officer radioed for the bomb squad, setting in motion a chain of events that would bring Victor's careful plan dangerously close to collapse. The arrival of the bomb squad transformed the quiet rear lot of the police station into a tense, high-stakes scene. Officers quickly cordoned off the area, moving all personnel and vehicles to a safe distance. Specialized technicians in heavy protective gear approached the suspicious trash bin with slow, deliberate steps, scanning for tripwires or remote triggers. The team deployed a small robotic unit first, its camera feeding live images back to the command vehicle. What they saw confirmed their fears. Inside the bin sat a tightly packed device surrounded by metal fragments, a crude but deadly design meant to maximize destruction. While the bomb squad worked to make the device safe, investigators began piecing together possible suspects. The wiring and circuit board inside the device matched components found in the discarded backpack from weeks earlier. That evidence had been carefully preserved, and now fingerprints taken from the wiring were run through the national database. The results came back quickly. Victor Hale. His prior arrest for a minor theft years ago had left prints on file, and now they were the missing link tying him directly to the explosives. With confirmation in hand, command authorized an immediate move on Victor's home before he had the chance to flee or destroy more evidence. Unmarked vehicles rolled silently toward his street, surrounding his property. Officers took positions while a tactical unit prepared to breach, but Victor was already outside, standing in his driveway as if he'd been waiting for them. In his right hand, he clutched another device smaller than the one at the station but still potentially lethal. Wires dangled from its casing, and his thumb hovered over a crude switch. His eyes scanned the approaching officers, calculating the distance, the timing, the chaos that would follow if he pressed down. Before he could act, a sharp crack echoed from across the street. A police sharpshooter had fired, striking the device and sending it spinning into the grass. Officers surged forward, tackling Victor to the ground with overwhelming force. The smaller bomb was secured, and the area was cleared in case of additional traps. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, some recording the scene on their phones, struggling to understand how the quiet, withdrawn man who lived among them had been moments away from unleashing a deadly attack on the very officers now leading him away in handcuffs. The calm of the suburban street was shattered. replaced by the uneasy realization of how close disaster had come. The search of Victor's garage revealed the full extent of his dangerous obsession. Every surface was covered in tools, containers of chemicals, and neatly labeled boxes of wires, batteries, and switches. On one workbench sat several incomplete devices in various stages of assembly, each more sophisticated than the last. In a locked cabinet, investigators found spiral notebooks filled with diagrams, measurements, and detailed notes on blast radiuses and detonation methods. There were even hand-drawn maps marking the locations of patrol routes, shift changes, and parking areas around town. As detectives sifted through the evidence, a disturbing picture emerged. Victor had been building toward this plan for years, his resentment toward law enforcement intensifying with each passing month. Old court records revealed a traffic arrest from nearly a decade earlier, a minor incident that had spiraled into fines and license suspension. Friends, few though they were, described how he never forgave what he saw as a personal injustice. Over time, his bitterness hardened into something darker, and his focus shifted entirely toward exacting revenge. In the days following his arrest, prosecutors worked quickly to compile a case that left no room for doubt. Surveillance footage from hardware stores, receipts for bulk chemical purchases, and the fingerprint evidence on the police station bomb created a seamless chain linking Victor to every stage of the crimes. The recovered notebooks served as a chilling narrative of his intent, showing not just how he built the devices, but when and where he planned to use them. Court proceedings drew large crowds, with residents eager to see the man who had nearly brought tragedy to their community. Prosecutors played footage of the trash bin bomb being wheeled away from the police station, the timestamp showing how narrowly disaster was avoided. They displayed photos of the seized devices, some packed with jagged metal intended to inflict maximum harm. The jury needed little convincing. Victor was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, his attempts at an appeal dismissed without hesitation. For the neighborhood, the ordeal left a lasting mark. The boarded-up garage stood as a constant reminder of the danger that had once been hidden in plain sight. In time, the street regained its quiet, but for those who had watched the events unfold, the sound of that early morning gunshot and the image of officers carrying away a live bomb would never be forgotten. The threat had been stopped, but the memory of how close they came to catastrophe would linger for years.